I always say, oh, yeah, call the other number, and then I always forget to press record. So, okay, we're good now.
Okay. No, I think I brought up everybody's stuff probably.
Yeah, I mean, there is, like, if you're at a higher frequency than everybody else in the house, then there's two things that can happen. Either they will raise to your frequency, which will bring up a lot of stuff, or you have to lower to theirs in order to create harmony. When that's kind of what, I've been kind of talking about with you this whole time, is being able to kind of hold that high frequency. But then that's what happens, is that there's nobody that really meets your frequency, so it can create some uncomfortableness for you as well, because you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have anyone to connect to here. But then the people that are around you it'll kind of bring up their stuff in order to reach your frequency. So it's hard being a high frequency being.
Well, I never considered myself to be that way. I just know that people are really nice to me in the beginning, and then as time goes on, they start attacking me and doing horrible things, and it just, the longer the relationship goes on, the worse it gets. To get into details is ridiculous, because I understand from what you're saying why it's happening now. For the first time, I finally understand why this strange pattern's been going on. But I never considered myself a high being. I never did. But now it makes more sense. Some people don't want to work together. They just don't.
Yeah.
And you can't force them to do that.
You can't. No.
That's why I have a problem with this whole oneness movement, because if people don't have oneness within themselves, how can they have oneness with me, or anybody else?
It's true. It definitely starts with you. And so how do you hold space? So that's like where, we never really got to it in the workshop, but is how to hold space for people to reach your frequency, and just in loving kindness. And what I play with, and it actually can be just kind of fun to play with it, is before you're going to be around other people, you make a conscious statement to connect to the highest frequency of who they are. So you're consciously saying, instead of absorbing their lower frequencies, I'm going to absorb their higher frequencies, because, we're still empathic. Like, we're still going to have these things where we're having energies move in and out of who we are, because that's just part of being a high frequency being, is that we're here to filter through those lower frequencies. And so instead of filtering through the lower frequencies, we ask to filter and connect to the higher frequencies, and then the lower frequencies can move through without them affecting us, if that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense, but it doesn't work that way. And I'm perplexed a little bit with this new Earth thing, because I don't see one Earth. I see multiples of Earth everywhere, and then when people, all these healers want, like that email I got from this woman, I don't remember what state she was in. I think it was Florida, where she wants to do this thing with the Earth, and I've heard that for a long time, and I said, I don't think that's my thing to do, and I don't see one Earth that needs to be cleaned up either.
I don't either. Honestly, I was just talking about this with Cindy yesterday, is that I believe that we're already in the fifth dimension and rising, like that we're living in multi-dimensions all at once.
Oh, yeah, that's what I see, too.
Yeah.
Especially after I ended up on that golden disc, I said, you can't tell me after that experience that there's one Earth. That's not what I'm seeing here,
No,
it was so
absolutely
profound. I said, I'll never forget this.
Yes. So it's, I think when people say the new Earth, it's just kind of like a generic term of saying that we're moving into a multi-dimensional way of being, and we're learning to live more in beyond space and time, and by raising our frequency and change our, when I say our state of consciousness changes, really what I'm saying is that our frequency is changing. And as our frequency raises, more light comes in between our molecules and our particles, and in that space in between is unity consciousness. And so we literally become unity consciousness. And what I mean by that is that we live at a frequency that is beyond duality or the illusion of being separate and dense, and that we move more into a state of consciousness where we're spatial and connected. And it doesn't mean that we don't understand that I'm me and you're you. We still have that understanding, but the knowing that we are the same is where we exist from. And so that, when I say consciousness, that's more what I'm talking about versus and then there is another way of saying consciousness of I became conscious of this old pattern that I didn't know I had before. Well, that's a whole nother kind of consciousness, because we're bringing something from our subconscious into our conscious where we can work on it and move past it. So it is kind of confusing, all the terms and that sort of thing. But I think for the most part, when people are saying New Earth, what they're talking about is that it's like the movement into knowing that we're living in a higher dimension.
But we're already there, though. We're already there.
But see, what happens is that people, and I know this is, when we move back and forth, like you say, I'm living in multi dimensions at one time. There's a lot of people out there that is not true for yet, and they very much think that they're living in the third dimension. And until their mind can expand to a place where they can start to consciously see that they are living in the fifth dimension, they will not have that reality until they raise in frequency to a place where their mind can expand to having that, what I call a knowing. It's not just an understanding. It's not just reading about it. It's actually a deep knowing in their body where they start to experience that. And then they're like, oh, yeah, now I get it. I am living in the fifth dimension. And they start creating from that place, if that makes sense.
Well, when you talk mind, I mean, for most people think the mind and the brain are in the same place, and I keep seeing the mind encompassing the whole body, and that is another real confusing thing, especially since I live in Silicon Valley. Everybody thinks their mind and their brain reside in the same place, and I just keep thinking to myself, what am I doing here? And I keep wanting to leave, and I can't leave, and I must have made a really deep, profound contract here or something, because I'm glued here. But this thing with the mind, most people don't understand that being other types of creation, the mind is the whole essence, the whole physicality, the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think when I say mind, I don't mean it like the parts of the brain. I mean, I do on some levels, because we work with the different parts of the brain in order to create higher consciousness. So I do mean that. But I guess when I'm saying mind, I'm talking more about there's the two minds. There's the third dimensional mind where we, kind of live in that lower brain where everything's about survival and reactivity, and then we move to the higher mind where we expand consciousness and bring in, because whether it actually comes from the mind or not, it's more of just a way of describing an experience or moving through old patterns versus the actual scientific, because we don't know, consciousness is definitely is beyond the mind. It's particles that are beyond space and time. If you think about who we really are, well, we're everything. So of course we're going to be more than just our brain. But what is our brain actually? We could go on. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it doesn't really matter the words that we put to it, because everybody kind of has their own language to describe what really language can't describe, because at that point we're really communicating more through the frequency, because we're still writing the manual. Like, this has never been done before. Like, we've never taken a whole entire planet and like people, people that are living in density and brought them into the light, where we're moving into really unity consciousness. Like, it's the evolution of mankind. And this is the time that it's happening, and we're writing the manual right now. So it's hard to put things that haven't been experienced into words, because we're actually writing it as we are going, if that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense, because this where the Earth is located is not just about the Earth. There's something much larger here being anchored for all of creation. And that is mind-boggling when I think about it. I can't imagine what it is for other people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and when I think when it all comes down to it, it doesn't really matter what everybody thinks, because everybody's going to have their own experience of how they evolve, and they're going to have their own level of transcendence and ascension. And so what matters the most, I think, is that you have your own experience and your own understanding, and just hold space. And it's great to be able to talk about it with somebody else that has an understanding of what you're going through. But other than that, I don't know that the words really matter, because it just doesn't, because we all have our own language to describe our experience.
Yeah, well, I'm keep struggling for what is my real work here. My background, like I said, is not in healing. Mostly, I have about 4 degrees, and it has nothing to do with healing. And I'm more of a futurist. I publish a digital magazine about the future of everything, and it's more an obsession than anything else. But I spend so much time teaching people how to walk into perspective and into their future, the optimal of everything they want. And it's been interesting, but I'm not teaching it on any platform or anything. Mostly when I'm walking around here, it always comes up, whether I'm fixing my car or eating or whatever it is, comes up a lot. And then I've been asked to be a professor 3 times, and I thought, no, I don't want to be a professor. And then a lot of people say, well, you already are. That's what you do. I said, I don't feel like I'm doing that, but, it's kind of interesting, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I was thinking, I said, maybe I should have a session with Jules and see what I'm meant to be doing. I have no idea.
So let's go into that. So what did you end up putting your intention as for the workshop?
I don't even remember. It was a conglomeration of many things, many pieces. Okay. I don't have it in front of me. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Because I'm almost wondering if that's have you been using your elixir?
Well, not consistently. That's what I was concerned about too, because I use parts of it, or today was the first time I used all of it. But sometimes I didn't use it at all. It's been very erratic, and I sure has something to do with where I live, because I kept feeling like I was being pulled in many directions every time I tried to use it.
So I'm thinking when you finally get moved somewhere where you're more supported frequency-wise, so that you can kind of dive deep into, what your purpose is without the interruption in the lower frequencies, that's what you should do your elixir with. And so it could be, something like, I am creating my highest purpose with ease and joy. And so you're connecting to the blueprint of your highest purpose. And then so you'll raise in frequency from where you are now to the frequency of you creating your highest purpose. And you can put it in your own words, but that's a great one to use. because what, like I said before, like what happens is you're going to move from, like, let's just say your purpose right now, you're vibrating at like 60, and let's say your highest purpose vibrates at like 150. So you're going to raise in frequency from whatever I said, I think it said 60 to 150, and all of the programs and like all of the interruptions that are in between will clear until you're resonating at 150, where you can create your purpose. And what will happen with that is that your consciousness will start to attach to those higher blueprints or places of intelligence, where you'll just start to be like, oh, I'm supposed to go do this, and now I'm supposed to go do this, and now I'm supposed to go do that. And you may not have this big answer of, oh, this is my purpose, but you're given the pathway, and then one day you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, here I am. I just was following each breadcrumb, and here I am. I've just created my purpose. And then there's like that aha moment, and then you move forward from there. I mean, I think that is the way that things are shifting and moving. We're not just given this like big answer and then we make it happen. We're given little tiny bits to lead us along the way, because it keeps us in the moment, and it also like forces us to trust without knowing why. And there's a big thing in there about like us being able to move into these higher frequencies is to not have to know how and not to know why, but we just keep doing the one little step that's right in front of us. Because in order to move beyond the third dimensional frequencies, we don't get to know how and why. We are just given this one little frequency until we raise to that frequency, and then we're given another one, and then we're given another one. And before we know it, we're at the frequency of what our intention was. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do, because during this 4 weeks, I rented a hotel room for a day or two because I had to get away from all this and feel my own energy. And I had some interesting things happen in those 2 days that were not moving forward and weren't clear to me at all. All of a sudden, people started contacting me from different parts of the country and different countries and asking me different things that if I could do. And so it was, my life will be very different when I'm not in this environment. I just have a bad habit of holding myself back to help other people, and I have to break this pattern. I mean, it started when I was a little girl with my mother, and I never stopped doing it.
Right, which is really typical of, kind of those higher frequency light being people, is because that's what we found. One way that we could connect was by making other people happy. And then if we made them happy, they were at a higher frequency, so it felt good to be around them. But then what ends up happening is we lose ourselves and our own energy in order to create that. And so we end up feeling drained, and then when we start to take our energy back in order to take care of ourselves, we get bad reactions from the other people because
that's kind of what I'm going through. I have an ex-boyfriend that it's just been really treating me really horribly the last 2 weeks, because he says he wants to be just like me, but he doesn't want to have to make any effort. And I said, I don't want you. You need to be the best you, not the best me, because that might be the best thing for you, But he doesn't see it that way,
Right. And you have to think because, and it's really hard to understand, but when people are around high frequency beings, especially one that is giving their energy to the other person, like with a boyfriend, let's say, and they will start to almost become addicted to it because you're feeding them a higher frequency that they thrive on. And so when you pull back and take back your frequency a little bit, a lot of times that other person will, and this is probably kind of what's happening with your roommates too, just by you being in the house, they started to resonate in that frequency. And then when you start to kind of stand up for yourself a little bit more or pull away because you're feeling drained, a lot of times the other people, they'll react to that, either by sulking, being angry, aloof. They'll do something to trigger you into giving them more energy. And they'll find ways to do it. It's different every time, but
That's
things to be aware
true. What I notice is a pattern of people trying to make me mad, to bring me down to where they live, I mean, so intentionally,
Yeah, because they're not getting the original energy that they had from you. So they'll do anything to get some sort of energy from you because they're used to that energy cycle of getting energy. And so they are not even aware of it though. Like, it just becomes a pattern of trying to get energy. And when a loop is
Has
made,
that happened to you a lot over the years?
It's just something that I've studied is the energy patterns of but, like being a high frequency being, like I'll say in the last year, the one that I've been working on the most is that one of just being nice. Like I just want to be nice to people. And, a lot of times I will hold space and I'll like say something. I'll stand up for myself and they'll be like, oh yeah, well, we hear that. Okay, we'll work on that. And then like 2 minutes later, they're doing it again. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, they didn't even hear me. And so I'll finally kind of give up and just let them win. But then I'll get to a place where I'm like, I can't do it anymore. Like, you have to be able to hear me. And then when I say it again, they get angry and defensive. And that's my pattern that I have noticed that I'm trying to break. So I just stop giving my energy from the get-go unless it's like back and forth and it's even. And a lot of times the people that I have problems with are people that have really strong personalities that want to have control or power over high frequency beings because it's their way of feeling good about themselves if they can have power over. And it's all a like false sense of power, and it's never something that's like outwardly done, and it's such an underlying power pattern that you don't even notice it until one person pulls out of the pattern and then the other person crumbles.
Yeah, I understand. I've been experiencing that a lot. Like two people in my life have just been like arm wrestling me, and I let it go, and they were even more unhappy to let it go. I said, they can arm wrestle themselves. I'm just going to say anything, And then they got more angry.
So I think that would be just like some really nice homework for you is to just start identifying those patterns that where one or the other person is getting energy from the other person, because there's different kinds of energy. Like if it's like an even exchange of life force energy and you leave a situation and you feel just as good or better than when you entered the situation, then that is an even exchange of energy. If you feel worse or drained after having like contact with other people, then it was an uneven exchange of energy. And that probably means you lowered your energy in order to connect to the other person.
Well, that's mostly what's been happening to me. I've been feeling very nauseous and sick a lot. And it's been getting worse in the last couple of weeks. Oh, yeah, it's been horrible.
You know what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to send you the recording of the workshop that I did on Monday. It has that, even if you just fast forward it to the end and just listen to the activation. But we talk a little bit about the home frequency and, we talk a little bit about this, but I think you will get something out of it just listening to it. And like I said, even if it's all you do is just listen to the activation at the end, you're going to get something out of it.
Well, I'm sure I will. And this whole thing of the home frequency, I mean, it's like there's that's not one frequency. That could be a multitude of them.
Not necessarily. Like your home frequency can shift, especially if you start to evolve past like the amount of frequency you can hold in your physical body. So as you raise in frequency, your home frequency will raise too. And the same can be if you're lowering your frequency, your home frequency is going to be a little bit lower. Like, it's just the amount of energy of your expanded self that you can bring into your physical body and actually resonate in. And so, like, your frequency of origin is, source. And so if you could hold the frequency of source in your physical body right now, you would probably explode. You wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, that is what evolution is bringing more and more light into a physical form and expanding the cells to a place where you become light. And that's what I mean. Like, we're writing that manual of how that is going to happen. And so your home frequency will change. And just getting to know what it is and then how it fluctuates will teach you so much about yourself.
I was going to ask you about this. It's not the sun that's getting more intense. And some people call it solar flare. It's not solar flare either. I mean, and some people say it's a new sun. I mean, the phenomena I'm having experience. It's like, for me, it even goes through walls and it finds me, and I don't have to be outdoors to experience it. It's really strange.
I mean,
what
if
is
you think
that?
about it, that totally makes sense as well, because the walls, like, we think that they're dense, but they're not. In the dimension that we're moving into, the particles are getting further and further apart. And so even though we think it's dense, it's not. So yeah, of course the sun is going to go to there isn't any way to hide from the downloads that are coming from the sun, because we're not in this dense reality anymore. We think we are in our reality, and like our mind is telling us this is true, but in a whole nother reality, the sun would shine through everything.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder. It's like, I mean, it was like in the evening it would last a couple hours. Now it's lasting longer and longer, and I'm saying I can't drive and not see nothing. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I understand.
It's to the point where I'm getting really fearful. I said before it would start, it's like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, so I'd have a little bit of time to get home. Now it's getting earlier and it's lasting longer, and I'm thinking, oh my God! I mean, now it's like not 2 or 3 hours. Now it's like 5 or 6 hours, and there's no place for me to hide. Where am I going to go?
If it ever gets too intense for you, you can always ask that it shifts into something that's more comfortable. Have you ever tried that? And I mean, because if it's uncomfortable, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, if you're like scared to drive home and stuff, like, you just need to ask, like, hey, I'm all about like taking on this energy and making it part of my life, but you got to tone it down a little so that I can live my life and have it be stable and all of that. So it is fair to ask how you want it to happen, and the frequencies will adjust to making it easier on you.
Have you been experiencing it a lot lately?
I used to have things like way more intense happen. Now I feel like because I live just like so more in the moment, and I've learned to move past needing to know why about so much of my life, that even if it is intense, I don't like register it so much as being intense, because I'm so used to the frequency and the shift already that it just becomes part of my life. And I don't, like I said, like I was kind of saying this the other day, or maybe it was on the Starcaster yesterday, that there's times where I forget like what my life used to be like, because I'm so engrossed in the moment and where I am now, that it's almost hard for me to remember what that was like, if that makes sense. And so
you have become that rhythm and that essence, so there's no separation inside of you anymore, probably.
There is at times, like, I'm definitely not going to say that I don't. And when I do, I'm like, oh, yeah, now I remember what it was like to live in density and, confusion and fear. Like, I'll remember when I'm in it, but I live in it so rarely that I forget like unless I'm actually experiencing it, I don't remember what it feels like.
Well, I can say you have created some very unique experiences. I really love the way you have created the cosmetics to include consciousness. That is incredible.
Aw, thank you. Yeah,
Probably
it's been
taken
so
your
much
whole
fun.
life to get to this point, huh?
And it's so funny, like when I say like just follow the breadcrumbs, that's truly what I mean, because at in the moment you don't realize like where it is taking you, because you only get to see that one little space that's like right there, because you're supposed to fully absorb that moment. But then when you're like a few moments ahead of it and you're like looking how it's all adding up together, I mean, it kind of gives me chills because it's so perfectly orchestrated. I mean, if you told me 5 years ago I was going to be developing a skincare line that holds the frequency of oneness, I would think you were insane. And even when I was
yeah, but your whole life has been about energy, though. That wouldn't surprise me, though.
Right. I mean, like I would have never guessed it. And like even as I was developing it, I didn't know it was going to be a skincare line. Like it wasn't until much later into my steps did I know that that's what I was creating. And I was probably 8 to 10 months in studying scalar energy and Ormus and healing with it and seeing what it does under, in different circumstances, adding it to a cream even. At that point, I didn't know I was making a skincare line. I was just healing with it. I was healing people's varicose veins and that sort of stuff with it. And then I don't know if you ever heard, I think I say it on some of my interviews, but it was actually I sent the cream to my ex-husband because he was always in pain. And I was like, hey, try this. And he put it on his face. And he called me and he was like, everybody at work is asking me if I had a facelift because your cream worked so well. And I'm like, you weren't supposed to put it on your face. And I'm like, but that's crazy. I'm going to try it. And then that's how my skincare line started.
Well, that was very inconspicuous.
I know, right? I mean, but it was like so divinely perfectly orchestrated. So anyway, so that's kind of what I mean about following the so I guess it's like, we get so wound up of like, oh, we have to know the big picture. We have to know the big picture. And actually we're just being asked to not know any of the picture. We're supposed to know, like, listen and do. If we get the message to go do something, we go do it. And we don't have to know why, and we don't need to know how. We just go do it. And then we get given the next breadcrumb. And the more that we trust and just those breadcrumbs and those messages and we keep following through, the bigger messages we get and the more we're going to get. And that's really when the magic starts to happen, is when we start to live in that place of just listen and do, and everything just unfolds right before you without even having any idea of how it's happening.
Are you still going to, if we pay you, still going to be able to do the scalar waves for the products we buy?
Yeah,
how does that work?
You're always welcome to continue with that anytime you want. So yeah, because just because this is the end doesn't make it the end. And and honestly, you had,
because I think especially during this transition for I'm moving, that would help me a lot. Because I need clarity.
Right. No, I totally get it. And the more you can move into using that elixir with a really strong I am statement with it and being more consistent, I think you're going to find that's really going to help as well. Because the more focused your attention is on your intention, even with that wish elixir, it's kind of like set up for that too. Is you set your intention, you connect to the frequency of it, and then you just keep putting your attention on your intention within your sphere, because really what you're doing is you're connecting the frequency of where you are now to the frequency of your desire, and then just staying super conscious on what comes up and what you're creating as you're moving in that frequency.
Yeah, that would make sense, because I'm tired of trying to figure it out. And I have a friend. I really appreciate her. She's brilliant, and she has an incredible education. But she keeps saying, you're trying to be a pioneer. You should just settle into being a settler. And I'm saying, my whole life has been about being a futurist. How can I be something other than what I am?
Right.
And I don't make money from some of the things I do. I make more money because I've learned how to work with money and mastered trading, and I've been doing a lot of options and other things like that because I never wanted my spiritual work to be denied to some being that didn't have any money. That's why I've kept them separate. But maybe I need to combine them. I don't know the answer to that either.
Well, I would say definitely hold space for that. And those are questions that you can ask and ask for the answer. And a lot of times it'll just be a feeling in your body, but you can ask for a sign. And what that will do is when you ask questions like that and then you ask for the answer from your high self or source or wherever you want to ask the question to, it's because you're going to put your attention on that. So you'll be looking for the answers. And by looking for the answers, you're creating a weave in the matrix that, yes, I want communication, I want guidance, and then you start that whole line of communication. So it's like asking the question, but then, waiting for the answer and observing and watching, and that's what creates that energy channel of guidance is by putting your attention on looking for the answer. So it doesn't mean it becomes this hyper focus. It's more of just a way of playing with energy in the universe because, okay, here's my question, and now I'm just going to hold space for the answer, and it's holding space with attention.
Did you ever see the movie Transcendence? And I think it was 2014 when it came out.
I don't know if you asked me that or somebody else, but if you didn't ask me that already, somebody else asked me that. But no, I've never seen it, and I feel like I should.
Well, it was an interesting movie because I didn't really pull it off. And the only reason I brought it up is because I write movie reviews for First Run Movies, and, I studied fine arts at UCLA with this master historian. And I rewrote that movie 3 different ways, and I'm not a filmmaker or anything. It just sort of happened. But during this process with you, I pulled out some of the things I wrote, and I was guided to tear them up, and I started something from scratch. And I'm saying, it wasn't time for that movie to have come out. That's why it was so disjointed. And I had started laughing. I said, now it's possibility to bring it in as it was supposed to be, but it's going to have to be a series. So I wrote an outline for a series. It wrote itself. I didn't write it. I was just like an instrument. And I'm saying, but I'm not a filmmaker. How can I do this? Anyway, I was having so much fun doing it that I couldn't stop myself. It was really kind of funny, It's like
oh my gosh.
But it was
so
like
okay, I'll have to watch the movie.
Well, there was another one, too, that came out, the great, did you ever see the great Mimsy? About this little girl and the Shurianta. I would have thought for sure you saw that. I don't remember when that one came out, but you can rent it on
I know I've
Netflix,
heard of that, and I think my girls have seen it, but I don't know if I have. I'm kind of
the other one you might like is August. Have your girls seen the August Rush? They would enjoy that, too.
Okay, I've seen that one. I saw that one. Yeah. That's with the music. It's like a little boy that's a musician or something, right?
Oh yeah, and he composes things from his environment. It kind of reminds me of my adopted mother because she was paralyzed from the neck down. She had no use of her body, but she was bringing in symphonies and all kinds of things. It was unbelievable.
That is great. Oh my gosh, I love hearing stuff like that.
Well, the amazing thing is when I would feel sorry for her, she would always tell me, I can do things that other people can't. And here I am, just a baby, holding the phone for her. I think I was only 1 or 2 years old, remembering all those stuff. course, I went to, nobody would believe me, this thing of working for my mother when I was 1 or 2 years old. Then I started working for my father when I was 3 for a different purpose. It had to do with land and bringing in visions of what should be in that piece of land. And I did that till I was 5. And so it's been a strange existence, you know. I feel like I'm living my life backwards now, going back to who I used to be.
That's
Probably
really
why I'm having, yeah, I'm living my life backwards.
Yeah, no, that kind of makes sense why you're having so many, like, downloads and.
Yeah, I've been having a lot of dreams about living, and it was like looking at my parents in different worlds and different circumstances. It was an amazing dream I had just last week about my parents. It was really unbelievable. I think I was born awake, but then I put myself to sleep because it was
and that's so
it was
common.
too soon.
Yes.
But this is the time. I think this is the time I was waiting for. I think this is really my time now to do what I'm supposed to do.
Right. I agree with
the
that.
The door is wide open now.
It is. All right, honey. So I had you scheduled for a half hour, so we're like 15 minutes over right now, and I have another call that I need to prepare for. So I am going to send you the recording of what we did today, and then I'm also going to send you the recording of the workshop from Monday, and you can play around with it and see if you resonate with it. But the activation is at the end of the recording.
Okay. Well, that will be the substitute for the activation we didn't do today.
Yeah, the one that I was telling you about that I did for the workshop that I had on Monday.
Yeah, it would have been nice to do that, but it didn't happen because I was too busy asking you questions.
No worries at all. But it's all in divine timing, and you're going to get it anyway. So it's so perfect. And I think I don't know. I just feel like you're supposed to listen to that workshop. So if you have time, I would just listen to the whole thing, and then you'll have the recording of the activation, and you can do it more than once if you want to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, sweetie.
And continue what it is. Just keep the never-ending story going. Look forward to hearing more about what you're doing next. Thank you.
Perfect.
A beautiful experience.
Lots of love to you. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you later. Okay, bye-bye.